It's really funny. When a laptop suddenly starts freezing up, like when the fans are screaming like a jet engine and the cursor is just completely stuck.
Right, and all your programs are crashing at the same time.
Exactly. Our instinct is never to try and fix it by, I don't know, putting a sleek new case on it. We don't polish the screen, slap a cool vintage sticker over the glowing logo and say, there, all better, problem totally solved.
I mean, if you did that, everyone around you would look at you like you'd lost your mind. Because, superficial changes can't patch a corrupted hard drive.
Right. We inherently understand that the hardware on the outside is just a shell. The actual crisis is happening in the dark, right underneath the keyboard. The operating system itself is fundamentally corrupted.
But look at how we treat our own lives.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, welcome to the Deep Dive. I am so glad you're here with us today, tuning in, because we are talking about what happens when we are the ones glitching.
Yeah, when we wake up feeling stuck or overwhelmed or just carrying this persistent low-grade disappointment in how our days are playing out.
And what's our cultural default move there?
Well,
we change the outside, we quit the job, we pack up and move to a totally new city, we buy an entirely new wardrobe or, adopt a completely new morning routine involving ice baths and obscure teas.
Slapping a shiny new sticker on the laptop.
Exactly. We slap a shiny new sticker on our lives and just expect our internal software to suddenly run perfectly.
It's the geographical cure or the material cure. And the most dangerous part of that strategy is that, well, for a very short window, it actually creates the illusion of working.
Right, because of the novelty.
Yeah, a new city provides this massive flood of novel stimuli. A new job requires learning new names, new commute routes. Your brain is just flooded with the dopamine of novelty. But then, usually around month 3 or 4, the novelty wears off, the dopamine drops, and something entirely predictable happens. The exact same insecurities, the same defensive communication styles, and the same familiar anxieties just bubble right back up to the surface.
You just unpack them in a different zip code.
Precisely. You brought yourself with you.
And that realization that the ultimate common denominator in all of our recurring frustrations is, well, us, that is the launching pad for today's exploration.
It's a tough pill to swallow, but it's necessary.
It really is. So if you're listening to this right now and feeling utterly exhausted by the traditional self-help treadmill, you have come to the right place. We all know the drill with that content, right? It's loud, it's hyped up, it's some guru yelling at you to just manifest it.
Or visualize a sports car until it magically appears in your driveway.
Yeah. And that entire industry relies on spiking your emotional state. It's essentially giving you a sugar rush of motivation that inevitably always crashes.
Which is why we're taking a much sturdier route today.
We are. We're pulling insights from a really comprehensive transcript off the audiobook Elevate channel. It's titled The Mind is Everything. And our mission for this deep dive is not to hike you up. It is to explore what the research calls the quiet, uncomfortable truth about how your mental operating system actually works.
And the core premise we're starting with here completely upends how most of us view our life trajectory.
It really does. It argues that your life is not shaped by one massive, dramatic movie moment decision. You don't ruin your life or save it in a single day.
No, you do it through the accumulation of thousands of microscopic, completely invisible mental choices you make every single Tuesday afternoon.
Which means we have to completely strip away the idea that thinking is just a passive event.
Right. Most of us treat our thoughts like weather. We assume thinking is just something that happens to us, like a passing doubt feels as harmless as a cloudy day. A quiet internal complaint about your commute feels entirely insignificant.
But the biological and psychological reality is vastly different. The source says there is absolutely no such thing as a neutral thought.
I want to highlight that because that is a massive shift. No neutral thoughts.
It stopped me in my tracks. Every single thought is actively doing something. It's either pulling you a millimeter forward or it is dragging you a millimeter backward. There is no idling in neutral.
The material uses this incredible phrase, every thought leaves a trace.
Every thought leaves a trace. When you visualize that like a literal physical trace being left behind in your brain, it changes the stakes entirely.
Let's actually look at the mechanics of what a trace is biologically, because it's fascinating. When you have a thought, you are firing an electrical signal across a synapse in your brain.
Okay.
If you think a specific thought repeatedly, say, I'm probably going to mess this presentation up, your brain recognizes that you're using this specific neural pathway quite a lot.
And the brain loves efficiency.
Exactly. It's incredibly efficient. So it wants to make that frequently traveled path faster and easier to use next time. So it begins a biological process called myelination.
Myelination, what is that exactly?
It physically wraps that specific neural connection in a fatty substance called myelin. Think of it like the plastic insulation on a copper wire. It makes the electrical signal travel significantly faster and with less effort.
Oh, wow. So a passing worry literally becomes a biologically insulated superhighway.
Yes. The thought is no longer just a fleeting concept. It is being structurally reinforced in your physical gray matter. That is why a thought is not neutral. When you think, I'll just try later, you aren't just delaying a task. You are literally laying down myelin on the pathway of procrastination.
You're neurochemically shutting down the drive to act.
Right. And when you repeatedly think, people are always judging me, you're training your amygdala, the fear center of the brain, to stay on high alert and scan every room for micro-expressions of disapproval. You are giving your nervous system an active assignment.
Which brings us perfectly to the voting system analogy in the text. I just love this framing. The material suggests we view the mind as a relentless voting booth.
A very busy voting booth.
Yeah, a polling station that never closes. Every time you indulge a thought, you are casting a single vote for the type of person you are ultimately becoming.
And obviously one single vote, like one cynical thought about a coworker on a random Thursday, that doesn't rig the entire election.
Right. But if you cast 50 of those votes every day for a decade, the outcome of who you become is mathematically undeniable.
It completely dismantles the myth of personality traits. People look at someone who is remarkably confident and they assume it's genetic or that the person had some magical, perfect childhood.
But confidence is just a behavioral outcome.
Exactly. It's the result of a million tiny votes for capability and resilience. And self-doubt works the exact same way. You don't wake up one morning inexplicably paralyzed by fear. You arrive there by quietly tolerating and validating fearful thoughts over years.
Okay, hold on. I need to jump in and push back here for a second. Because when I really absorb this concept, my immediate reaction is, honestly, panic.
Which makes sense. There's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. If every single thought is leaving a physical trace and casting a vote, isn't it completely exhausting to have to police my own brain? Like, am I doomed if I just have a genuinely terrible day and my mind is flooded with dark, pessimistic garbage? Do I have to become an authoritarian dictator inside my own head?
That is the most natural fear to have when you first encounter this level of mental responsibility. But there's a crucial distinction the material makes between awareness and authoritarian control.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, your brain is a thought-generating organ. Just like your heart pumps blood without your permission, your brain will pump out thoughts, random, bizarre, wildly inappropriate, and deeply negative thoughts completely without your consent.
Okay, phew. That is a relief, because sometimes a thought crosses my mind and I think, where on earth did that come from?
Oh, we all experience that. The goal is not to stop the production of those thoughts. That's biologically impossible. The goal is recognizing their direction once they arrive.
Recognizing the direction.
Right. You can't control who knocks on the front door of your mind, but you absolutely control whether you open the door, invite them into the living room, and offer them a cup of coffee. You don't have to police the initial flash of a negative thought. You just have to refuse to entertain it.
Oh, I like that. It's the difference between noticing it started raining and deliberately deciding to walk outside, stand in the freezing downpour, and then complain that you're wet.
Exactly. You acknowledge the rain, but you stay inside.
And the reason so many of us naturally walk out into the rain, according to the source, is because of what it calls invisible scripts. This is where the operating system analogy really hits home.
Yes, the legacy code.
Right. Many of the thoughts that you assume are your own original ideas are actually legacy code. They are invisible scripts that were written and installed long before you had the cognitive ability to question them.
Let's dig into that, because I know a lot of people find the idea of invisible scripts deeply unsettling.
It is. The idea that my internal monologue might just be a recording of someone else's voice, that's spooky.
It is. But you absorb these scripts from your environment when your brain is in its most plastic receptive state, usually in early childhood. You absorb them from the microdynamics in your family home, from the rigid social hierarchies of middle school, from cultural messaging.
You're just soaking it all up.
Exactly. You learn very early on what specific behaviors earn you love and safety, and what behaviors trigger rejection or anger.
So give me a concrete example of this. How does a childhood script play out in an adult's daily life?
Okay, imagine a child growing up in a house where the parents are highly volatile.
Okay.
That child learns very quickly that being invisible is the safest strategy. If they don't speak up, they don't get yelled at. They write a script in their mind. Attention is dangerous. Silence equals safety.
Which makes total sense for survival in that environment.
It's brilliant for survival. But now, fast forward 30 years, that child is a highly competent 38-year-old executive sitting in a boardroom. They have a brilliant idea that could literally solve the company's problem. But the moment they think about speaking up, their chest tightens, their throat closes, and they stay completely silent.
And if you ask them why they didn't speak up, they wouldn't say, because I'm terrified of my volatile father.
No, never. They'd say, I'm just naturally introverted. I'm just not a big talker in meetings.
They camouflage the invisible script as their permanent identity.
Exactly. When we declare, this is just how I am, I'm just a worrier, I'm just a procrastinator, I'm just bad at relationships, we are almost always mistaking a deeply entrenched survival script for our fundamental nature.
We confuse a repeated pattern with permanence.
Yes. And the brain fiercely prefers familiarity over uncertainty. Even if a script is causing you immense pain, even if it's holding back your career, your brain prefers it because it knows how to survive it. Stepping outside that script feels like walking into the dark.
That explains the universal human paradox so perfectly. It explains why we can desperately, consciously want to change. We want to write the novel, we want to start the business, we want to get healthy, and yet we actively sabotage the very steps required to achieve those goals.
It's not because we're lazy.
Right. It's because our conscious mind is reaching for growth, but the older, deeper operating system is violently clinging to a script designed for survival.
And the material is very clear that we should not harbor resentment toward these scripts.
Oh, really? Why not?
Because at one point in your life, that script kept you safe. That strategy of staying quiet in the volatile house was actually a brilliant adaptive move for a vulnerable child. It served a vital purpose. The tragedy only occurs when that protective armor goes completely unquestioned into adulthood and transforms into a prison.
Wow. So how do we start dismantling the prison?
The material actually points to specific language as the telltale sign of an active script. It highlights words that, as it beautifully puts it, quietly close doors.
The absolute terms. Yes. So if you are listening, I want you to mentally flag these 4 words in your own internal dialogue. Always, never, impossible, and too late.
They are completely absolute. When your mind says, I always mess up these interviews, or it is too late for me to pivot to a new industry, you are instantly collapsing your reality down to a single negative timeline.
You're slamming the door.
You're telling your brain that the future is already determined, which gives your brain permission to stop trying. It shuts down creative problem solving entirely.
And it doesn't just stop your mind, it physically alters your body. I actually tried the experiment the material suggests.
The body scan.
Yeah. The next time you catch your mind spiraling into one of those always or never scripts, you just pause and do a body scan. When I lean into a defeatist thought, my physical energy literally drains. My posture caves inward, my breathing gets shallow. Even something simple like answering an email suddenly feels like moving through wet cement.
Because your biology is reacting to the script. Now contrast that physiological state with the state produced by deliberate, grounded thinking. And notice, we are not saying blind optimism here.
Right. Big difference.
Huge difference. We're talking about grounded clarity. When you interrupt the script and think, this situation's highly complex, but I have a track record of figuring things out, the physical response is radically different.
Your chest opens up.
Yes, your nervous system downregulates. Your vision actually broadens literally. Your peripheral vision expands when you aren't in a threat state. The external problem hasn't moved an inch. It's still sitting right there on your desk. But your internal capacity to dismantle it has doubled.
This cause and effect relationship between thoughts and our physical state leads perfectly into the biggest trap we fall into. Because once we realize our default scripts are negative, our culturally conditioned response is to fight back with an overwhelming tidal wave of positivity.
The toxic positivity trap.
Yeah, we buy the coffee mugs with upbeat slogans. We force ourselves to smile. We try to affirmation our way out of the hole. But the source material just takes a sledgehammer to this approach.
It mounts a severe critique of the modern positive thinking movement. It labels positivity as fundamentally fragile.
I love that word for it, fragile. But why? Why is trying to look on the bright side considered a vulnerability here?
Because positivity, as it's commonly practiced, is entirely dependent on your emotional state. It relies on mood. And human mood is arguably the most unstable, volatile foundation you could possibly build a life upon.
It changes every hour.
Exactly. You could wake up at 7 a.m. feeling invincible, The sun is shining, the coffee is perfect, you listen to a great song, and you are radiating positivity. By 11:30 a.m., you get a passive-aggressive email from a client, you spill water on your keyboard, and a deadline gets moved up. What happens to the positivity?
It vaporizes instantly. If your operating system requires you to feel good in order to function, you are a hostage to every minor inconvenience that happens throughout your day.
Positivity simply cannot bear the weight of real-world adversity. When severe pressure is applied, when a business venture fails, or a health crisis hits, an affirmation taped to your bathroom mirror is not going to hold your psychology together.
No, it's not.
Positivity is an attempt to seek emotional relief. It's looking for comfort. The material contrasts this directly with the structure of discipline.
Discipline over positivity. The shift is subtle but massive. Positivity asks, how can I feel better about this awful situation? Discipline accepts the awful situation and asks, what thought do I need to hold in my mind to act responsibly right now, regardless of how much I hate this?
Discipline does not demand that you enjoy the storm. It only demands that you keep your hands on the wheel. And this is where we see the fallout of what's often called toxic positivity. Yeah. People are suffering from deep psychological burnout because they are expending mass amounts of energy trying to manipulate their own feelings. They believe that if they feel anxious or unmotivated, they are somehow failing. So they cite the anxiety, trying to force themselves to feel happy.
It is exhausting. You're fighting a war on two fronts. You're dealing with the actual problem, and you're fighting yourself for having a natural human reaction to the problem.
It's a profound waste of cognitive bandwidth. Discipline removes the internal war. A disciplined mind acknowledges the anxiety. Yes, my heart is racing. Yes, I'm afraid this will fail. And then takes the necessary action anyway.
Which brings us to the most mind-bending insight in the entire transcript, I think. It's regarding how the nervous system learns, because this flips the script on how we view confidence.
Oh, this is a game changer.
It really is. The standard belief is that confidence is the key that unlocks action. We say things like, once I feel more confident, I'll launch the podcast, or once I build up my self-esteem, I'll set a boundary with that person. We wait for confidence to arrive like a delivery package.
And that waiting room is where dreams go to die.
Yeah.
The biological reality is the exact reverse. Confidence is never a prerequisite for action. Confidence is the residue of action.
The residue. Think about the biology of that. Explain how the nervous system actually processes fear and action.
So your nervous system is essentially a predictive engine, and it learns exclusively through undeniable experiential evidence. Not through theory, not through positive affirmations.
Right.
When you face a scenario that scares you, say, public speaking, your nervous system sounds the alarm. It spikes your cortisol, increases your heart rate, and tells you, this is a threat to our social survival. Run away.
And if you listen to that alarm, if you fake an illness and skip the speech,
if you retreat, you send a very clear, potent signal back to the nervous system. You validate the alarm. You teach your brain, you were right, that podium was incredibly dangerous. Thank goodness we avoided it. Avoidance equals survival.
Reinforcing the fear.
Exactly. The next time you have to speak, the fear will be 10 times louder because you reinforce the pathway. But if you walk up to that podium, hand shaking, voice cracking, absolutely terrified, and you deliver the speech anyway,
you survive.
You survive it. And that survival is a massive data point for the nervous system. The brain realizes, wait, we felt extreme terror, but we didn't die. No one attacked us. The threat was miscalculated.
Wow.
By taking action despite the fear, you physically rewire the fear response. That is how genuine, sturdy confidence is built. It is built on a foundation of undeniable proof that you can handle discomfort. Positive thinking without action provides zero proof. Your brain knows when you are lying to it.
So the mandate for you, listening right now, is to stop waiting for the feeling of readiness. The material challenges us to audit our days and spot the moments where we are choosing comfort over clarity.
Those micro moments.
Yeah. Notice that split second when you look at a difficult email, feel a spike of anxiety, and immediately open a new tab to check the news instead. You are choosing the comfort of distraction over the clarity of dealing with the problem.
And that exact mechanism, the pivot from a difficult task to a comforting distraction, is the perfect bridge to understanding our modern environment. Because if discipline requires us to endure discomfort and take action, it means we need to marshal our mental energy.
But we are currently living in a historical moment where marshaling our energy is phenomenally difficult.
Because our attention is under siege. We aren't just casually distracted. We are navigating an environment engineered by the smartest people on the planet to fracture our focus and keep us in a perpetual state of twitchy reaction.
And this should alleviate a lot of the heavy guilt people carry. The material makes a really compelling argument that the epidemic of unfulfilled goals isn't actually a crisis of willpower or a lack of motivation. It is a fundamental crisis of focus.
The processor is overloaded.
Yes. I use the computer analogy for this all the time because it is exactly what it feels like. Imagine you're trying to render a massive, complex 4K video file on your laptop. That requires a lot of processing power.
Right.
But in the background, you have 60 different browser tabs open. 5 of them are playing autoplay videos, your email client is aggressively pinging every 3 minutes, and 3 different messaging apps are syncing. What happens when you hit render?
System stalls, the fan spins out of control, the mouse lags, and eventually the software crashes entirely.
And it doesn't crash because the processor itself is weak or broken.
No, it crashes because the processor's resources have been entirely cannibalized by the background noise. There's literally nothing left for the heavy lifting.
That is precisely what we are doing to our own brains. We are asking our minds to do the heavy lifting of building a career, maintaining a marriage, raising kids, or improving our health, while simultaneously keeping 60 mental tabs open. We're tracking global tragedies, comparing our lives to curated highlight reels on social media, anticipating emails, and stressing about the economy.
And the physiological cost of that fragmentation is staggering. The brain consumes roughly 20% of the body's energy. When you constantly switch your attention, glancing at your phone, returning to a spreadsheet, checking a notification, jumping back to a conversation, you are burning immense amounts of glucose.
Just burning through it.
Yeah. The material points out a startling reality. Uncontrolled, fractured thinking generates profound emotional and physical fatigue long before you've done any actual physical labor.
Yes. You can sit in an ergonomic chair in a climate-controlled room for 8 hours, type on a keyboard, and commute home, feeling like you just dragged yourself through a triathlon. Your bones ache. You are completely depleted.
That depletion is the biological toll of living in a hypervigilant state. We need to look at how the sympathetic nervous system operates here. The human nervous system is an ancient piece of hardware. It evolved to protect us from immediate physical predators.
Like a tiger.
Right, a tiger. But here is the flaw in the system. It cannot easily distinguish between a literal tiger standing in front of you and a vividly imagined threat you read about on Twitter.
That is terrifying. It cannot tell the difference between reality and imagination.
Not at the neurochemical level, no. When your mind is wandering unchecked, constantly scanning the digital horizon for outrage, bad news, or social comparison, your brain interprets that data as an active threat environment.
It thinks you're under attack.
Exactly. It engages the sympathetic nervous system. It drips cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your breathing moves from your deep diaphragm into your shallow upper chest. Your muscles carry a low-grade persistent tension. You spend your entire day in a subtle state of fight or flight.
You are running the engine in the red zone while parked in the driveway. No wonder we're all exhausted. And the material notes that we've actually trained our minds to crave stimulation instead of purpose. We reach for the phone not because we want information, but because deep, sustained focus has actually become physically uncomfortable to us.
We experience actual dopamine withdrawal when things get quiet. So the question becomes, how do we reclaim our processing power?
Right. Because I can't just throw my phone into the ocean and move to a cabin in the woods. I have a job, I have responsibilities. How do we focus when the urgency is everywhere?
Well, the source material offers an incredibly elegant, simple definition to combat this. It states, focus is direction. Focus is not about gritting your teeth and staring unblinking at a piece of paper. It is the conscious, deliberate reduction of internal friction. It's establishing a clear hierarchy of what actually matters.
And it gives us a filtering mechanism, a single question that acts as a bouncer for your brain. I started using this immediately after reading the transcript.
It's so effective.
It really is. Whenever you feel that familiar rising tide of overwhelm or the twitchy urge to check a feed, you pause and ask, is this worthy of my attention right now?
It is a ruthless, brilliant filter. It treats your attention not as an infinite resource, but as finite currency. Is arguing with a stranger in a comment section worthy of my attention currency right now? Is replaying an embarrassing interaction from 4 years ago worthy of my attention right now? Is doom scrolling going to move me an inch closer to the life I am trying to build?
And almost always the honest answer is no. But as the text warns, very few people have the courage to actually ask that question. Because when we strip away the outward distractions, the wandering mind doesn't just stop, it turns inward. It retreats into the internal echo chamber.
And that internal echo chamber is not an empty room. It is occupied. It is narrated by a very specific, relentless entity that dictates your reality.
The inner voice. This brings us to a crucial part of the deep dive. We all have that voice narrating our lives, but the material makes a radical claim about it. It says that the inner voice is not just a passive commentator describing what is happening, it is an active instruction manual.
Yes.
It is categorizing every moment of your life, telling you what is safe, who to trust, what you are capable of, and what is inevitably going to fail.
And the most paradigm-shifting realization here is the origin of that voice. The text emphasizes that your inner voice is borrowed.
Borrowed, like the invisible scripts.
Exactly. We touched on this with the scripts, but this applies directly to the tone and vocabulary you use on yourself. When you drop a glass in the kitchen, or you miss a deadline, the specific cadence of the voice that reprimands you is not entirely your own. It's an amalgamation.
A mix in everyone else.
Right. It is the impatience of a stressed parent, the harsh critique of a demanding teacher, the lingering humiliation of a past failure, all blended together and internalized.
You hear it so often that you assume it's the objective truth of who you are. I'm just realistic about my flaws, we say. But it's not realism, it's a borrowed tape playing on a loop.
Exactly. And understanding the power of this voice leads to what is arguably the most controversial yet freeing assertion in the entire analysis. The material argues that external events do not create your emotions. Thoughts create your emotions.
Okay, I have to stop you there. I really struggled with this concept initially. It sounds a little like gaslighting.
I hear that a lot.
Right. Like, if I am driving to work, minding my own business, and someone texting on their phone rear-ends my car, I am instantly intensely furious. The car crash, the event, made me angry. I didn't sit there and thoughtfully think myself into a rage. The emotion was instantaneous. How can the text claim the event didn't cause the emotion?
It feels instantaneous because the brain processes it at lightning speed. But there is a mechanical gap between the bumper crunching and the anger flaring.
A gap?
Yes. The car crash is just raw, objective data. In the physical world, metal hit metal. The gap is occupied by interpretation. The prefrontal cortex must rapidly assign meaning to that raw data before the amygdala can generate an emotional response.
Okay, break that down for me. What is the interpretation happening in the crash?
In the split second after the impact, your brain writes an invisible sentence. This idiot just ruined my entire day. My insurance is going to skyrocket. I'm going to be late. People are so incredibly disrespectful.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I'd be thinking.
Right. And that specific sentence is what generates the intense flush of anger. Now imagine a different driver in the exact same crash. Metal hits metal. But their brain instantly writes a different sentence. Oh my God, the car is crushed, but my kids in the backseat aren't crying. We are physically unharmed. We survived. What emotion does that sentence generate?
Intense relief. Overwhelming gratitude.
Precisely. Two identical physical events. Two completely different emotional realities. If the event itself dictated the emotion, both drivers would have to feel the exact same rage. The fact that they don't proves that the event is neutral data. The emotion is manufactured entirely by the meaning your inner voice assigns to it.
That is a staggering realization, because if you believe that the world dictates your feelings, you are trapped in a lifelong game of defense.
Completely trapped.
You will spend all your energy trying to control other people, manipulate situations, and avoid any possible risk just so you can feel okay. But the world is chaotic and uncontrollable. You will always be a victim of circumstance.
But if you accept that your thoughts create your emotions, you reclaim total sovereignty over your internal state. You stop trying to micromanage the universe, and you start managing your interpretations. You become the author of your experience.
But this brings up a practical issue. Theory is great, but in the heat of the moment, let's say I make a massive, deeply embarrassing mistake on a project at work. My inner voice immediately goes for the throat. You are a complete fraud. Everyone knows you're incompetent. You always ruin everything.
The inner tyrant.
Yeah, the shame is physically sickening. How do I intercept that? I can't just suddenly tell myself, I'm a genius, and this mistake is actually a blessing. My brain will call my bluff.
And it should call your bluff, because delusional positivity doesn't work, like we discussed. The material provides a highly specific remedy for this. The antidote to a toxic inner critic is not empty praise, it is precision.
Precision. Explain how that works in the scenario of the massive work mistake.
A harsh inner critic relies on sweeping generalizations and catastrophic language. Always, never, fraud, incompetent. These words attack your core identity. To use precision, you must strip away the identity attack and focus exclusively on the mechanics of the event. You replace the exaggerated thought with a ruthlessly accurate, responsible statement.
So instead of, I always ruin everything and I'm a fraud,
You interrupt it and dictate. This specific strategy failed. I missed a crucial detail in the report. I am embarrassed, but this failure is an event, not my identity. I will own the mistake, review where the process broke down, and try again tomorrow.
the tone shifts completely.
Yes, you aren't letting yourself off the hook. You are taking extreme responsibility. But the tone of the inner voice shifts from a punishing tyrant to an effective leader.
And a good leader doesn't publicly humiliate an employee when they drop the ball.
Exactly. A good leader analyzes the breakdown and provides clear direction for improvement. When you become that leader for yourself, you create profound internal safety.
And when you feel safe inside your own head, your entire posture toward the world changes. You stop being terrified of failure because you know that even if you fall flat on your face, you aren't going to subject yourself to days of internal emotional abuse. You recover faster. You take bolder risks.
And this is the critical turn in our discussion, knowing this intellectually is not the finish line.
Right. You can listen to this deep dive, nod along, think, wow, precision over praise, great concept. And then tomorrow morning, the moment you spill coffee on your shirt, the inner tyrant is screaming again.
Because the tyrant has decades of myelinated neural pathways on its side. Your new, precise inner leader is just a flimsy dirt path in the brain, which brings us to the necessity of training. The material is uncompromising on this. The mind must be treated exactly like a physical muscle.
The mental gym. I appreciate the physical fitness analogy here because it grounds the psychology. You would never walk into a gym, load up a barbell with heavy weights, struggle to lift it one time, and then walk out declaring, excellent, I have achieved physical strength. I never need to touch a weight again.
Never. We inherently understand that physical adaptation requires consistent repetition over time.
Yet, we approach mental health and mental training as if it's a light switch. We read one self-help book, we attend one weekend seminar, we feel an emotional high for 48 hours, and then we are bewildered when our chronic anxiety returns the following week. We treat it as an event rather than a lifestyle.
The source material drives home a mantra here: consistency over intensity. You do not need to quit your job and meditate on a mountain for 10 hours a day to rewire your operating system. The brain adapts much faster to short, daily, repetitive course corrections.
It's the micro moments. It's catching the thought, I can't handle this, and taking 10 seconds to precisely reframe it to, I am overwhelmed, but I will tackle the first step. Doing that 5 times a day, every day, builds the new neural superhighway.
But there is a specific environment required for this training to take root, and it is something our modern culture is utterly terrified of: silence.
Both silence.
The material emphasizes that stillness and silence are non-negotiable components of mental training. But it redefines them. It says stillness is not inactivity. Stillness is control.
That is a massive paradigm shift. We've been conditioned by the attention economy to view slowness, pauses, and silence as a lack of productivity. If you aren't doing something, listening to something, or expressing something, you are falling behind. We glorify speed.
But a mind that cannot tolerate silence is a mind that is constantly fleeing from itself.
Why are we so desperate to escape the quiet, though? The text has a piercing insight here. It says we are not actually afraid of the silence itself. We are afraid of what the silence allows to surface.
That's the real fear. When you turn off the podcast, shut the laptop, and sit in a quiet room, the external noise stops, but the internal noise becomes deafening. All the unresolved tension, the unmade decisions, the quiet anxieties about your relationships or your career, they immediately float to the surface. It is deeply uncomfortable.
So the moment that discomfort hits, we instinctively reach for the phone to drown it out again. We use noise as an anesthetic.
Precisely, or rather exactly the point. We use it to numb the symptom without treating the disease. But the strongest minds utilize stillness as a deliberate filter. Silence is what creates the gap between a stimulus and your response.
Give me an example of the gap in action.
Okay, imagine you receive an aggressive, condescending email from a colleague. The immediate instinctual script fires. Attack back. Defend your ego. Put them in their place.
Oh yeah, I've drafted that email in my head many times.
We all have. If you lack stillness, you immediately hammer out a reactive, angry reply and hit send. You let the script dictate your behavior.
Yeah.
But if you have trained in stillness, you feel that same spike of anger, but you insert a gap. You step back. You let the thought mature. You realize sending an angry reply will only escalate this and make me look unprofessional. I will wait an hour and respond with dry, factual data.
Silence is the space where you realize you have a choice. It is the ultimate form of restraint. And restraint is profound power. When you learn to sit with an uncomfortable emotion without immediately trying to numb it or act on it, you teach your nervous system that emotions are just weather.
They roll in, they storm, and they pass.
Exactly. You don't have to panic every time it rains. And as we zoom out to synthesize the ultimate thesis of this material, it all converges on a single point about identity. The text states unequivocally, you become the person you think like.
You become the person you think like.
The gap between who you are right now sitting in your car or doing the dishes or walking the dog and the person you desperately want to be is not a gap of time. It's not a gap of raw talent or waiting for the right external opportunity to finally arrive. The gap is entirely a gap of thinking.
You do not transform your identity in one dramatic, cinematic turning point. You build your identity quietly, in the dark, through the thoughts you return to when absolutely no one is watching.
Just laying down that myelin day by day.
Exactly. If you consistently choose to think with patience instead of panic when things go wrong, you eventually inevitably become a patient person. If you can consistently choose to filter for clarity instead of seeking the comfort of distraction, you become a decisive person.
Identity isn't a label you buy. It is a biological and psychological pattern. The mind learns who you are by watching what you repeatedly allow yourself to think and do. Over time, with enough deliberate votes cast, those disciplined thoughts stop feeling like hard work. They become instinct. They become the new, upgraded operating system.
So to bring this entire deep dive home for you, the learner, we've covered a vast terrain today. We started by exposing the myth of the neutral thought, recognizing that every thought is a vote. We uncovered those invisible legacy scripts from childhood that masquerade as our personalities.
We looked at why the cultural obsession with positive thinking is a fragile trap, because it relies on the instability of mood, and why we must adopt the sturdy structure of discipline instead. We explored the biological toll of our fractured attention economy, and why focus is the ultimate reduction of internal friction.
We dismantled the illusion that external events cause our emotions, recognizing that our inner voice, our interpretation, is the true author of our feelings. And we learned how to refine that inner voice from a toxic critic into a precise, responsible leader.
Finally, we looked at the mental gym, treating the mind like a muscle, embracing consistency over intensity, and having the courage to sit in silence so we can finally hear what we need to fix.
The ultimate takeaway here is grace combined with extreme ownership. This process is not about achieving some state of enlightened, flawless perfection. You're still going to have bad days. You're still going to have moments where the old scripts take over and you act out of fear.
We're human.
Right. The goal is reliability. It's about becoming someone who knows exactly how to return to baseline clarity after a massive distraction. It is about recognizing that your life is being shaped quietly right now by the thoughts you tolerate. And claiming responsibility for that isn't about blaming yourself for where you are. It is about recognizing your absolute freedom to choose where you go next.
I want to leave you with one final, unmentioned provocation based on everything we have unpacked today. Something for you to chew on as you move back into the noise of your day. The next time you feel a sudden, overwhelming emotion grip you, whether it's a spike of anxiety before a meeting, a flash of defensive anger during a conversation, or even a sudden, quiet burst of joy, I want you to freeze. Do not look out at what just happened in the room around you. Turn inward. Look for the invisible sentence your mind just wrote about what happened in the room. If you can catch the author in the act of writing that sentence, you might just experience the most profound realization of your life. You are the one holding the pen.
And the only question that matters then is, what are you going to write next?
Are you going to keep running the old, corrupted legacy software? Or are you finally ready to update the operating system? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the scripts, keep training the mind, and we will catch you next time.